Testing. While we hand out the last few copies of all your notes, I want to share with you a little bit this morning. First of all, I want to thank every one of you for coming out in this nasty weather. Many people have been ill this week. I really appreciate every single person here. I made this course in several different ways. Number one, we're filming it and putting it on YouTube, and we should have thousands of people watching it that way. Also, if you look at your notes, you'll see that there are some things highlighted in blue.
It's not in white soil.
Oh, okay. It's all good. What you'll see is the web addresses, if it does apply, or the phone numbers of the prospective companies that I'm going to talk about this morning that you'll need to know about. There's a whole wealth of information here and resources in Western North Carolina. This is one of the areas in America that is the strongest force in backyard gardening. One of the areas. As a result, we have a huge amount to select from, which is wonderful for gardening. Now, if you notice, I put websites and phone numbers by some of the companies. You'll find this. You don't have to look now. But what I've done is, I'm going to put this paper on my website. It's auburnskyfarm.com. auburnskyfarm.com. I'm going to put this paper on the website, and what you can do, all the items that you see that I talk about today, you'll actually be able to click on a link next to that item on this very paper, and boom, you'll go right there on the internet and you can order it right there, whatever you desire. So I've saved you the trouble and all the looking. I've done all the homework for you. So you'll be able to just go, if you have a home computer, and you'll be able to download this document and these videos as well. I'm going to make available, as I said, they're going to be on YouTube, but there will be, basically when you go to my website, you'll be able to watch all these videos again. If you miss something, you'll be able to catch up on it. You'll also download this document and you'll be able to click on any links that you're interested in ordering some of the items, and you'll automatically go there on the web. You don't have to do anything. I've done all the work for you. And I'm happy to do that. This course is a 4-part series. It may develop to 6 because there's some things that don't apply to seasonal. But this is a seasonal gardening course. It's not an advanced course. It's for beginners. It's enough to get you up and running. It's enough to get you exposure to certain ideas, and you can see if you want to try some of them. So the first thing I'd like to do is show you some of the exhibits that we have. Over here I've got lettuces on the far my right, your left, and those I planted roughly about a week ago, give or take, and I water them with this device right here. Now what I have is, now by the way, this is not a course on starting seedlings, but I will be doing that next time as part of the class. But I want to show you. Do you see these little trays? I list where to buy these. You can buy them from Farm Tech or Greenhouse Megastore. You don't have to write this down because it's already in your notes. And these trays are wonderful. What I'll do is I'll let these little lettuces grow up to be about that high. And then I'll stick them in my cold frame. And we'll have lettuce to eat. Now, lettuce is a cold weather crop. It loves the cold. Lettuce can freeze, did you know that? Now you got to be careful with it. You can't go out there picking on it ready to eat if it's frozen. You have to wait till it thaws out. But when you have a cold frame, you'll find a cold frame is just like a greenhouse. It gets really warm in that thing in the daytime, and when that cold frame warms up in the afternoon, you can go out there and pick your lettuce. We picked a whole bowl full of lettuce just Friday out of our planter boxes. I like this. What I do is I keep a diluted mixture of hydroponic formula, because when I take care of my plants, I often will, every 2 weeks, I'll change out the water, and I have that left over. So what I do is I'll dilute it 50-50, and I'll use it to water seedlings, and I'll use it to water some of my greenhouse plants. So what I'll do, this kind of spray here, you see that? It won't hurt the plants. I can spray it on it and it's nice and gentle. So I wanted to show you guys that so you had another way of thinking about things. These plants here, we're going to talk about a little later. But one thing I really want you guys to notice is how stocky and beefy this plant is. That plant is only a couple of months old. Now, if you notice, these two plants here, I'm just going to give you a basic primer. These two plants right here are clones. And I love peppers. Oh, I've got a passion for peppers. You know, peppers have more vitamin C in them than you might really know. They have a huge amount of vitamin C, especially sweet peppers. So those peppers, I had plants that I really liked. So what I did, I took cuttings and I put them in a cloning machine that I made I put together the parts and I made it from Walmart and the hydroponics store. And I cloned these peppers. One of them's a red, one of them's an orange. Really nice pepper plant, the parent plant that they came from. But what I noticed was they've taken a little time to really start to take off. So next time I may do from seed. So I don't want you to hold it against me because those things look like runts. Because these were all planted down in the hydroton at the same time. The hydroton is the growing medium that you use in hydroponics that you'll see here. It's the little clay balls. This plant right here is wanting to vine. This is a cucumber. The cucumber's doing really well, but I'll tell you, I got to get on the stick about doing something about trellising these things because they're not going to make it if I don't. I've got some ideas. I'll talk about that a little later once we get into that. Let's talk about cold frames. There are several different kind of cold frames. If you notice on the picture in the upper left-hand corner, we have the cold frame, the lowest end is facing south. You always want to do that. Now, the best type of gardener for an indoor gardener is one that has a south-facing home with lots of windows. Now, I don't have that. I'm jealous of all you who do because that is the best setup. You don't really need as many lights, although you still need some lights. But this cold frame is just a simple box with some kind of glass or plexiglass or something put over it. What I'm going to talk about today is going to be a little different than you may have ever heard of before. It's actually cheaper than you'll find locally. This cold frame right here, let me get my pointer. This cold frame right here somebody just took a bunch of old windows that they had probably laying around in their barn, and they made a planter box, and then they just built a framework over it. That's a nice cold frame, but I don't like that as much as I like mine, which is right here. I've got on my property, I've got long planter boxes. I've got them on a hill. There's 6 of them, and they're 32 feet long. So what I did, I wanted to convert them. I wanted some cold frames this year, and I wanted to make it really easy on myself. I don't want to be overworked in gardening. So what I did, I had some greenhouse material left over. This polycarbonate here, which is really good for making a cold frame. It's actually insulated. And anyway, I took and I made 2 cold frames that are 8 feet long. They're all 4 feet wide. And then I made 1 cold frame that's 4 feet long. So I have a total of roughly, if my math serves me right, 20 feet worth of cold frame by 4 feet long. That is enough to grow broccoli, lettuce, any kind of thing I want to grow. Now, if you notice here, I don't know if you can see it, but right here, do you see these straps? Those are bungee cords. Now, since this is a 4-foot cold frame, I use, or 4-foot planter box, I use 4-foot bungee cords with eye hooks that I just installed. It took me like 15 minutes. And I had some wood, which we'll talk about in a minute. And I basically took these straps and I hook it into these eye hooks on the side, and that holds these things down in the strongest type of wind you can get. And you don't have to build a whole framework around your glass or plexiglass, which is what most folks do. They'll put it on hinges, and they'll have a wood mill, and they'll do a framework. You know, I didn't want to get into that because I don't have that kind of time. I've got to get things done quick because my time is valuable, but I want the same effect that everybody else gets. I want to have good quality on what I do. These cold frames have really been cranking it really well. Now, here's a side shot. You can see the bungee cords right here. And you can see, do you see this, how I've left the angle portion open? Well, you might think that's counterproductive. You might think, boy, those plants are going to get cold. Well, it doesn't matter. Those plants all love cold anyway. They're lettuces and they're different types of cold weather plants, which we're going to discuss in a minute, what to plant. But for now, I want you to know something about this device right here, this cold frame, is that when the sun comes out and shines hot, do you know something about greenhouse effect? You know how it can be 20 degrees in your car, and it can be 20 degrees outside, and you get in your car and it's nice and warm, like 60 or 70 degrees. It's the same thing with a cold frame, but these things can get so hot that they can burn your plants. Well, some people, what they'll do, the guys that put the hinges on the windows and lay that thing flat and cover it in completely, and there's no way for air to circulate, you know what they have to do? They have to come out with a stick and prop that window open every day. I don't have that kind of time. I don't want to do that. That takes a lot of time. I want to try to garden. When I garden, I keep it simple. And I do things as effectively as possible, because generally when I garden, I only got 5 minutes to get the task done. So I'm going to do it smart. I'm not going to be out there doing something a hard, time-consuming way, breaking my back. And that, to me, is an impossible task, to go out there every day and guesstimate when the sun's going to be shining hot enough and try to figure out to open it up. So I don't do that. I just leave this portion right here open. Now, if you notice, I got two 2x4s stacked on top of each other. I'll show you a little more about that.
Do squirrels get in it?
No, they haven't bothered me. Let me show you a little more about that. Now, this box right here is the tallest one I have. It's growing broccoli. And I've got a real big board here. This is it's a 2x8. And this one on this side is a 2x12. And I just had to have them sitting right down on the box. I haven't nailed them or done anything because the bungee cords hold all this together nicely. And because they're inserted into a planter box, oh, they're held down wonderfully. They're not going anywhere. So once again, I haven't worked myself to death. I just get 2 8-foot long boards and I'll stick them down there. Now what I do is I go by 4s, and I'm going to show you what I mean by that. Because these boxes back here, you see this box and this box? Those boxes are actually 2x4 on the low end and 2x8 on the high end. I've always got a 4-inch fall. I'll show you here. Now, this cold frame, I used a FarmTech 8mm twin wall polycarbonate. It's a 4x8 sheet. Like I say, I had them left over from the greenhouse, so I just stuck them out of my garage onto this thing, cut them up and made them fit. But I have a 4-foot planter bed, and I do 1-inch tilt per foot. So for 4 feet, you'll have 4 inches of tilt. That's why when I buy the boards for the front and back side of the cold frame, the high and the low end, you don't want to make it flat. You got to make a lean on the thing. I'll use a 2x4 with a 2x8. This thing went another. 2x4 with a 2x8 on some of the lower plants. And then once the plants start growing up, I'll just take that wood out of there, and then I'll take a 2x8 and a 2x12. And I'll just slowly notch it up. Usually 2x12 is as high as you have to go. Now one thing I want to mention is that you want to use eye hooks for your bungee cords. An eye hook is a little hook that you screw in the side of the planter box that you build. And that way the bungee cord, if it was ever to come out, it won't slap you in the eye while you're trying to get it to hook on one side. And I've put here, you close up all but the angle for venting. Now another thing I am going to give free on my website is this PowerPoint, so you guys can go back and review this stuff. So another way of venting, if you did have a bunch of windows laying around the house and you wanted to build an enclosed cold frame like what a lot of folks do, there's no bottom on a cold frame basically. You make a really good area of soil, you want good black soil, work your dirt, and then what you can do is you can put one of these. This is from Lowe's, and it's an automatic venting device in that it will open and close itself whenever it gets warm or cool. Now, I don't like using those because they're a bit pricey. You know, I'm on a budget. I'll tell you, I'll get as quality as I can. I'll do as high quality as I can because I don't believe in doing cheap. But I also don't believe in riding my budget till it costs me so much that it takes the fun out of gardening. Gardening isn't fun if it's costing you a boatload of money. Don't forget to water these things as needed. What I generally like to do, if you notice here, I took the tops off of each of the cold frames, and I basically, you see the bungee cords, you probably can't see it from where you're at, but they're lightly, I don't have them strapped down real tight to my fence, but I have it lightly on there just so it holds them down. If there's a good wind, those things won't move. And I'm getting rain on those things. I've never watered these cold frames once. I've only used rain, and we've gotten enough rain lately, so it doesn't really matter. If I had to water, I would water. I don't want my plants to die and lose my investment. One thing about gardening, when you work on that thing all the way along, and you put a lot of work into something, you don't want that thing to die. You'll be willing to put any amount of labor to do it right. What to grow? You know, here's a good list here. Basically, you want to start with plants that love the cold. So what I've got listed here is Asian greens, like tatsoi, bok choy. Those things are really good. You can fry that plant. You can eat it like lettuce. It's a wonderful, the Asian greens are wonderful lettuces. I have those planted in my cold frames. Beets, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, carrots, cauliflower, celery, chard, collards, chicory, kale, calabrese, leeks, lettuce, parsnips, rutabaga, spinach, and turnips. Now, that's a fairly extensive list. You wouldn't think that you could plant that much during the winter. But all those things thrive. They can handle, remember the picture in the beginning? Those were leeks and they were kale. And those things had snow all over them. And it doesn't hurt them as long as you leave them alone. You come back in the sunshine and pick a leaf off here or there, and if you got a few plants, you just pick a leaf off every plant and you got yourself a salad. I decided that I wanted to put a chart on here to make it a little easier for people as well, to kind of divvy up what plants go in certain times of the year. Now we're not going to cover the other ones, but this really lists what likes it really cold and in a moderate cold environment. And you know, my goal is to feed my family out of my garden. I'm not there yet, but I'm close. It's usually the exception, not the rule, when we have to go buy lettuce at the supermarket. We just harvested a big bowl of lettuce. I might show it to you if we have time after the course is done Friday. Now these things, it's better to plant in the fall for the winter. When the ground is warm, you want to get them started. Now obviously these things I did not. These things over here, these lettuces, those are spring mix lettuce. These are like these little small lettuce leaves you buy in the store, and they're those big bags for like, what, 10 bucks? I don't shop. My wife does all the shopping. So, but what I've heard is that prices are exorbitant over there. Anyway, those little lettuces, they're fine. If I let them grow up about that big and then put them in that cold frame, they'll go through a little shock, but they'll be okay. They'll grow out. And it's not really cold here like it is way up north. We can get away with a lot out here. But these things do better. Onions, you'll usually plant those around October, roughly, somewhere in November. And those things, they are wonderful. You know, I plant usually about a whole planter box of onions. And I'll plant lots of potatoes, and that's a staple right there for some of us people from the South. Of course, I'm not originally from here, but I love taters and onions. Onions you'll need to wait till early July to pick. So you'll plant them and they'll grow all the way through the winter. Last winter, I didn't cover those things. Now, you're probably not supposed to do this, but I didn't cover them. I just let the snow come down on them, anything, the weather. And they were looking a little peaked at times, but in that springtime, those things just shot right up. And they did great. I had a whole harvest of onions, and we ate on those things for several months. Kale, garlic. I planted garlic this year. I hadn't planted it before. I love garlic. What I put down below is that you can leave them uncovered in the winter. All these are really cold loving plants. You don't have to cover them. Now occasionally I may cover them with a frost blanket, but really lately I decided to just throw the frost blanket to the curb, because I really, you know, to get out there and do all that. One day I got out there, it was 20 degrees and it was really cold, and the wind was whipping like about probably 30 miles an hour on that hilltop I live on. And I put that frost blanket down, and I took all the energy to put the rocks. Oh, I had it so beautifully. And when I got up the next morning, the frost blanket had flown up against the fence, and it didn't do diddly. So ever since then, that kind of took the steam out of my sails, and I haven't put any more frost blanket down. That's not to say now, if I have something that really, like I'm putting my tomatoes out in the spring, and and I've got them out and they're weatherizing and they're almost there or something, I can't bring them back inside for whatever reason, I got too many plants, I will frost blanket them then, and I'll make sure that that thing don't come if there's strong winds. But in this case, these cold weather plants, they can freeze, they can thaw, they love it. Nothing's going to hurt. Let's get into talking about soil. I want to cover different things today. There's different modes of soil on your home garden. My preferred, most favorite method is mushroom compost. It's a little on the pricey side, but I'll tell you, I can get a whole truckload of that for about $60. And if I compare that with those bags that I buy at Lowe's, there's really no comparison. I'm probably getting double for my money and at least 5 times the quality. Now, I haven't listed that here. That's something that I like to do. Now, one thing I want to say, since everybody from around the world is watching this video right now, is use what you have locally. Some of these things that I mentioned here, you're going to be able to find your own local stores and your own way of doing things. Some of you that may be from a little bit further away, if you have something that's local that's really good, use it. I love mushroom compost, but this is a soil mixture that will take the place of those soils that you buy in the supermarket or Lowe's. This soil is 1 part cocoa coir. And I'm not sure, I didn't bring that with me today, but what cocoa coir is, it's like peat moss. Now, people go back and forth about using peat moss and different things. I don't want to get into any arguments or any politics about that. I like using peat moss. If I need to use it, I'm going to use it. But I want to tell you one thing. Cocoa coir and peat moss is sort of interchangeable, but peat moss is a little on the acidic side. So you got to be a little careful. If you know you're going to throw a lot of it down, like I have potatoes that I want to really load up that soil with peat moss, so I can just dig my hand down 4 feet down and get a potato. You know, I'm not going to dig that far, but you get the point. I want to be able to have soil that's so soft and good that those potatoes will just explode underneath the ground because they've got plenty of really area to just go fast. There's no dirt clods and nothing. So I'm going to use a lot of peat moss in that. But as far as this soil goes, this soil mixture is sort of a replacement for potting soil. Since we're going to be doing an indoor gardening course, I figured I'd tell you how to make it. So you can use peat moss, but just watch your pH. Now, I love this item. I think I bought this for $19 at Lowe's. And this has a moisture meter. It's got a light meter on it. And it's got a pH meter. Wow, all that for 19 bucks. So I bought like probably 3 or 4 of these things, and I keep them at different areas on the farm. And I really like this. You know, this thing for indoor gardening, I can stick it in there under those lights and find out how much power I'm getting. Those lights, by the way, are generally about like what you'll get on a cloudy day. On this side, now on that side it's a little stronger because I got that big light on it. But these things are really great. So what you want to do, if you're going to use peat moss, you want to use a pH meter, and this is really easy to use. And just make sure that you bring your pH to whatever your plant likes. Cocoa coir, 1 part, and then you have 1 part compost. Now, if you don't have compost, there's people that are just starting out in gardening. They don't really know how to make compost. We're not going to cover that today, but I do plan on having a class on compost. You can buy any kind of generic brand of compost at Lowe's. I buy that cheap dollar. It's like $1.50 or something of Black Cow. I'll buy that if I feel like I need it. I've used that some in my planter boxes. I don't use it a whole lot because I make my own compost. That's the preferred way. But you use 1 part of that, and then you use a 1/2 part of perlite. Now, cocoa coir, you can either get from Fifth Season, which is a store in Asheville. They have every kind of great organic thing you could possibly want. They're a hydroponics store. And the perlite, I get at Southern Ag in Hendersonville. I can buy a big bale of it, a bag this big around by about that high of perlite for $10. And that lasts me a long time. And so I buy it from there because I like their price. And perlite, what it does is it conditions the soil and allows the soil to be able to breathe. So if you mix that mixture up, mix it all together, you can take and put your plants in that and they'll love it. It basically will replace any kind of potting soil. And if you shop around and find the best prices, you'll find it's cheaper by about half of the potting soil you'll buy in the store. Organic gardening. There's two types of gardeners, and I really want to dwell on this for a few minutes. There's the majority of the gardening today goes something like this. A guy will come out in a white suit. He's completely covered because he's going to spray some chemicals. And he's going to spray and spray at his heart's content, several different kind of chemicals, until those plants are so saturated with whatever those chemicals are. And by the way, he's got that white suit because he doesn't want to be saturated. But he doesn't stop to think people are eating this. I mean, you think what? The plant isn't going to absorb all that stuff? Anyway, I've talked to several of these farmers. They're my friends. You know, I don't hold it against them because they're of the old school. I'm not of that school. I'm going to tell you the difference. So I talked to a farmer that lives near me, and I asked him to teach me the way he was doing things. And he told me he loved to spray. You know, every 5 days he'd spray for bugs. And he was so proud that he did not have one bug on his garden. And he picked up some of his soil, which was like a barren desert, and he let it run through his fingers, and there was no life in that soil. That's what you call inorganic gardening. That is the way that you're getting your food from the supermarket. It's all inorganic. It's not healthy. They don't breed those plants that you get out of the supermarket either for taste. They breed them to be able to drive 2,000 miles. They breed them to be able to pick green and then have some color when they get to the supermarket. They don't care about the bricks. Do you know what bricks is? A wonderful, sweet Adventist gentleman coined the phrase high bricks. He was a scientist. And basically what that means is that your soil and your growing environment is so healthy and full of good stuff that that food is bursting with nutrition. Now there's something called a bricks meter that you can put on your food that you can tell how healthy it is for you. Most of the food that you get from the supermarket is not really going to show very high bricks, including the organic. Because that organic stuff, all that means is that they don't use pesticides that are chemical, but they still use organic pesticides. So they're still spraying. Don't think they're not. Because, I mean, you're going to get bugs no matter where you're at. So what I've chosen today is really put an emphasis on inorganic gardening. And what organic gardening, I'm sorry. What organic gardening means is that I'm going to feed my soil. Now, one thing about inorganic gardening, like for example using K-Grow, a lot of folks I've heard around these parts use that, or Miracle Grow, a lot of the old timers will use that. What that does is, that puts a salt-based chloride and it goes directly into the plant and it does not feed the soil. It basically builds up salts in the soil. Now what it does, it's like going to Burger King for your plant, and it gives that plant a tremendous boost of energy. But what happens is there's a downfall over that, because what it does is it makes your soil sterile over time. And that soil, if you're doing in a pot you're growing, you'll find that when you're done with that plant and that plant has gone, and you look at that soil, it'll be kind of green on the top and kind of white. and it's hard. And when you take it out of the pot, you have to throw it away. It's no good for anything. You can't mix it. That soil mixture that I just taught you how to make, you can't mix that soil. Now this soil I'm getting ready to teach you how to make, you can take this soil and grow a plant full to term. Because it's organic, it feeds your soil, it doesn't feed the plant. And that soil is so healthy that even after that plant's gone, you can use this soil formula to inoculate your new soil. This is a really potent way of doing things. So what you do, you use urea and potash. And make sure when you buy your urea and your potash that you buy them in a water-soluble form. This can be used in any type of drip irrigation. This is an organic low-salt mix that encourages healthy microbes, bacteria, and feeds the soil. Now what we have is we have 1 part urea microprill, and then we have 1 part potash. Now these are organic, by the way. There's a difference between organic and inorganic in that an organic fertilizer that you make yourself, now we have 2 parts of bone meal. This particular type too. I don't want you to buy any other type. I want you to get high yield bone meal. The reason is because these things need to be water soluble. You know, if I want to stick these things through a drip irrigation system, I want to be able to do it. I don't want my mixture to be laying down on the bottom of something and not going to my soil. So these things will all mix nicely. I get the urea and the potash at Southern Ag in Hendersonville. They're fairly inexpensive, and I get my bone meal at a store right next door. It's called Nealon's Feed. Now what we're going to do, I'm going to show you how to mix this up real quick and how to use it. Okay. Okay, we're going to take 1 part of urea. The urea supplies nitrogen for your plants. Now, it's a natural type of nitrogen. It's not a chemical type of nitrogen. Now, all of these items, when you make this mixture, you're going to fairly need to use that mixture the same day and right away. You don't want to leave this stuff in the liquid form laying around for a few days because it'll smell a little bit. That's one drawback of using organic stuff but if you know that going in and you just mix it up and you use a little bit what you need there that day and then you mix it the next day you need it, you'll be fine. You don't want to leave this stuff sit for several days because it will smell. Okay, right about to here roughly when you average it all out. So I'm going to use 1 part urea. One part of potash.
using, I see you're not using gloves or anything, so it's all...
It's organic.
It's okay?
It's fine, yes. Now you don't want to breathe this stuff. But just to take one thing and put it in a thing, I'm not worried about it. I'm trying not to touch it too, but it's not going to hurt me. Now on the bone meal, we're going to want 2 cups of bone meal. And remember, I want you to get this certain type. It's called high yield. And that's the only kind they have at the store anyway. You'll stir it well, and then what you'll do, now pardon me for having a tablespoon here. I forgot to bring my teaspoon, but you can guess it is about right. You use 1 level teaspoon per gallon of water. And what this does is this will feed your soil, and you'll have that good, vibrant health of your soil that you can use for the life of the plant. And if this is the only thing that you grow with, that's just fine. Now, in some cases, I might like to use micronutrients. Sometimes I'll throw that on there. I'll use azomite rock dust or sea kelp, and I put seawater down there, but I really don't use seawater too much except on fruit trees. But seawater, interestingly enough, has about 90 micronutrients. The azomite rock dust has about 80 roughly, and sea kelp has a lot too as well. I'm not taking any questions because we're filming this. Now we will have time. If you write your questions down, I'll be happy to answer them at the end of the class because we have a lot of material to cover. For specialized use on feeding the soil, I like using cottonseed meal. And it's somewhat acidic and can be used on plants that thrive in lower pH soils such as azaleas, rhododendrons, potatoes, and roses. So cottonseed meal is organic, and it's something that can be used really well on those particular items. Now alfalfa meal is really good, and it's a great source of trace elements for fertilizing and soil conditioning. Alfalfa meal is loved by roses and earthworms alike. It works very well as a compost bioactivator due to its remarkable nitrogen to carbon ratio, and also makes a great mulch for use in the planting and growing stages of your plant's life. Alfalfa meal is a very good thing to use. Now I want you to notice this plant. I don't know if you probably won't be able to see as well, but this is a tomato plant that fills a whole room, much like one of these over here, especially the one on the left is probably going to become that. And what they did, they grew it out of this bucket, just like I'm doing over here, and they hung it off of strings. You can see the strings coming down here, hanging this plant up, because that plant would not be able to live being that big any other way. So I want you guys to think about something. When you grow in this fashion over here, hydroponically, those things are going to take off, and they're going to grow so vigorously that you're really going to need to keep on target about how you tie those plants up and keep them propped up so they don't break. Especially when the fruit comes along. It's really difficult when you have a plant that's doing really well and you haven't quite propped it up as well as you should, and then the fruit comes along and just breaks the vine. I had that happen like 4 or 5 times this year in my greenhouse. So I'm going to be doing a little better on that next year. By the way, you may be thinking about this, well, that's a plant that might be doing that, but that's never going to do that for me. No, that's not the case at all. This is quite common for tomato plants and different types of flowering, fruiting plants to grow that large. One thing I like about hydroponics is, now, I still am going to grow out of the ground, and in my planter boxes, I'll still get my tractor out and grow in the soil, in the earth, in my 100 by 100 garden or whatever it is. I'll still do all that. I'll still work on my soil. But I like this method because I could put this on my porch and build a little trellis for it, and my wife can go out there and pick fresh tomatoes for our salad every day. This plant will feed a family of 4. It's one plant. If you're a shut-in and you're in poor health, you could still grow your own food doing this. You grow one plant and you got all the food you want. So you don't have to have as much of a garden. But I still like doing the other methods. Now, on the chemical mixture I just gave you, you can also use that to water your outdoor plants. You can use it everywhere. I want you to remember to never use more than 1 level tablespoon. If you're looking at it and you think, boy, that looks like it's not very much per gallon of water, and you say, well, I'll just put in a heaping spoonful. That is going to go a long way to kill your plants because that's too much. And you really just want to keep it at that level. And for 5 gallons, what I like to do is use a slightly heaping tablespoon, because you know most of the time you're going to be mixing up more than just 1 gallon. I'd like to talk a little bit about lights. Lights have sure changed from what they used to be. I would have never considered indoor gardening a few years ago. But with the advent of CFL bulbs, I wouldn't really use LEDs because I've heard they work well. I'm not going to go out and spend several $100s or $1,000 on a light. I want to show you this bulb lasts 9 years. Pardon me while I move this stuff out. Now, if you notice, this bulb, it says 400 watts. Do you see this? It says 400 W. Well, this bulb, it puts out the same light as a 400 watt bulb. Can you guys see this okay? You see how huge that bulb is? That bulb is an 85 watt bulb. Now I can run this thing on a timer, which I have all these on timers. And what I did, I went on eBay, pardon me. I went on eBay and I bought this stand and this holder. And I bought this from the company that sold that light. How much would you guys guess? Take a wild guess. One of you spit out a number on what you think this bulb would cost.
$35.
Yeah, you would think it'd be a little expensive, wouldn't you? Maybe $100, $200. It's $15. And that bulb will last 9 years. And it puts out the same as a 400 watt metal halide bulb. So now, for $15, if you don't, I'm going to give you the links on where to buy the nice little stand and the fixture and the hood. This little shroud that goes on it, it makes it be able to cast 80% more light to the area that it's pointing towards. So it's really going to be effective. When that tomato plant starts putting out tomatoes, they'll be nice and large. There'll be no, sometimes under lights you'll have something that's really small and puny. But remember, this is going to be like a 400 watt metal halide, but also because it's a CFL bulb, it's not going to be as hot, so I can get that thing right as close to that plant as I want, within reason. Now, if you get it too close, it'll burn the leaves. You don't want to do that. But another thing is the light spectrum is really nice on these things. On the Kelvin scale, it's 5200, which is as close to sunlight by an artificial means as you can get. So these are really nice bulbs. And they're very inexpensive. Now, that covers this light. But if you notice, the light I actually have on the screen is here. Now those are a little bit smaller lights. They're 200 watt equivalent. But they're a quarter of the actual wattage is what they consume, so they only are like a 50 watt light bulb. So as you see, I have two of them there. Basically, I'm getting about 400 watts, and I'm only consuming 100 watts. So it's 4:1 is the ratio. And that's really nice. That is not going to jack up my electric bill to use those lights. And I can use a few of them. And what I do is I put the timer on, I put mine on 18 on and 8 off. A lot of folks will do 12 on and 12 off, which I'm thinking about switching to that. So if I was basically going to run those 12 on, 12 off, then I'm only using 50 watts worth of light all day. That's not going to jack my electric bill at all. So I can get a lot of plants to grow underneath that thing. I can do all 5 of those buckets, and we'll continue to do that. Now, these things I might add, they're a little more pricey, but I think it's worth it. They're roughly $95 each. But for the amount of time that I'll get out of those bulbs, usually around 10 years, and the look and feel and the way the plants like it, I'm okay with that. I may end up spending about, at that price, $10 a year after it's all said and done. And then when I go out and buy a bulb to replace that one, it's probably going to only cost me 10 or 15 bucks anyway. So the bulb is not really what costs, it's the actual hood on that thing. Oh, pardon me. One thing, I got that from Virtual Sun Hydroponics. Now, if you notice on all these, I have not only given you the name of the website, and in many cases the item number, if it needed one, the price, but I also gave you the 1-800 number for people that don't have computer, because there's quite a few folks here that don't have computers. And you can still get these things. So this is the bulb we just discussed, and I get that from a company called 1000bulbs.com. Now, I usually have one thing, if you've noticed, I got one thing, I get at all different kinds of stores. Because I go with the cheapest thing, the best quality I can get for my money at the lowest price. These are the parts that I got to make that stand. And there's the item numbers. Like I say, this stuff is all on your notes, so you don't have to write any of this down. Pest control. When you're going to be doing indoor gardening, you might think, well, there's not going to be any pests. The truth of the matter is you're still going to get aphids and whiteflies. I have some of those things on these here now. Usually what I'll do is I'll take the plant outside, I'll hold the plant firmly, and I'll just spray it with a little bit of jet of water that I'm pushing my thumb down on the garden hose, and all those bugs will just go away. Some of them will drop, and those things are real easy to kill. They don't run away. So I'll show you something. If you notice, I put pick or spray off. If you're going to be growing in this hydroponic medium and you have aphids or whiteflies, they'll fall on this hydroton. And what you do is, they'll crawl on it and you just roll it and they're gone. And then you just throw it back on here. I can kill all the aphids that can light on one of those plants. Generally, the aphids and whiteflies stay off of all the plants, except for those two little small ones you see on your right, because those were clones, and they're stressed a little bit, as you can tell. Those are the only plants that tend to get that. If you have a healthy plant, you will not get bugs on that plant. It's been proven scientifically that bugs do not come to a plant that's healthy. And that's well documented. There's a few things that I really like for pest control. Now this is going to cover everything but hydroponics. I won't use any kind of chemicals generally on my hydroponics. I like using diatomaceous earth because you can take that and put it in a salt shaker, an old empty salt shaker, and just shake it on your plants. And what happens is the bugs get on it or around it or anything, and they basically get shredded. Because diatomaceous earth it's a type of thing that is like, it's like sea coral that's been ground up and it's like glass. And it won't hurt you. You can eat it, believe it or not. I don't eat it, but I'm saying you can eat it. It's totally inert. You can put it in your pet food if you think they got worms, and it'll kill the worms. Diatomaceous earth is one of the best bug controls that's out there that is completely inert. It's not a poison. It doesn't put anything in the environment. It's just basically sea coral. Neem oil. That's something that you can use if you have little flying bugs, like say around I had them around my bean plants, which you can grow some type of peas in the wintertime. And neem oil is good if you get some type of bugs around those. Pyrethrin is another thing that you can use. These are all organic. I prefer not to use them. I will not use them on a hydroponic setup, but I'll use them if I have something growing in a pot. I do grow in a lot of pots, by the way. I have a greenhouse, and I grow in a lot of pots. So those things have come in handy, but I found the #1 method is picking those bugs off by hand. And it may sound hard, but really it only takes me about 5 or 10 minutes, and that covers about 2 weeks worth of time. And it's interesting how we are here in America, how our mindset is. You know, we want to just spray something and take a minute and done. But what's wrong with spending 10 minutes and just taking care of your stuff with no chemicals? Of course, there'll be some that always like to run to the spray. I've got yellow sticky insect killer down here. I ordered these from China off of eBay. I didn't realize they were coming from China until after I bought them. I don't mind, because they were cheap. These things are pretty neat. Let's see if I can get this thing open. Basically what it is, you see that? This is super sticky, and what you do is, you can put this inside. It's inert, it won't hurt you. You can just put it up inside, prop it up on like a little fork thingamajig. They sell them at Lowe's, I've seen them before. Something like this. And you just prop them up and the bugs will fly onto them. Or if you got aphids, something you know about aphids is, if you shake that plant, all those aphids are just going to drop like a rock. And if you have this laying waiting for them, they're not going to get away. Yeah. So I love this method. I saw somebody online using this in their greenhouses, and they say, we use this for an early detection system. So they don't get overrun with bugs. They can find, if you got 1 or 2 bugs on this thing and you got one of these in your grow room inside, you'll be able to tell right away, oh, I got bugs somewhere, and you'll be able to go look. It's a lot easier to use something like this, and the bugs are actually drawn to this. We're going to take a break now. We're going to have a 15-minute break. And I would like for you guys, if you have questions, please feel free, write down your questions. As I said, we're filming this. We're not going to answer any questions until we're through the material, and then I'll be happy to answer all the questions you would like. So let's take a 15-minute break. We'll come back at 11:30.